Hello, everyone. I'm Nate Fields, Associate Editor for Modern Machine Shop, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, Navigating Defense Work Amidst the Rapid CMMC Rollout, brought to you by ProShop. So in this webinar, discover your best path forward in the world of defense work compliance in this informative session. Secure your future in defense. Our presenters today will be Paul Van Meter and Nick Priest, Tyler Kowalczyk, and let's see, Paul, do you want to do the rest of the introductions?
I can certainly do the rest.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us today. I realize as Nate was describing the title, maybe the word rapid should not actually be in this because it has been anything but rapid, but it is picking up speed at this point. So it is an important topic, especially for anyone that is at all in the defense industrial base supporting the government and defense contractors. So if that's you, you're in the right spot. And I'm excited to introduce the guests. We're going to start just real quick with our, actually maybe some housekeeping. So, you know, in this platform, there's the chat. You can, I think you can chat in there, share. I always like to ask people where they're joining from, so we can see where in the country or world people are joining us from. So if you're open to that, go ahead and throw that in there. And then there's the formal Q&A section. So please, if you do have questions at any point, please throw those in the Q&A, and we will definitely have time for those at the end. You'll also see there's a couple of handout links that Eric's, thanks for kicking us off in Frederick, Colorado, Leander, Texas, Dubuque, Iowa. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Love it. Love it. Love it. There you go. There we go. And we're going to start just by sharing our mission statement. We always start with this. We think it's really important because it truly drives what gets us excited every day. We deliver powerful manufacturing software by deeply understanding our clients' challenges in order to meaningfully improve their businesses and in turn their communities. And for all of you that are working in machine shops or precision manufacturing, you are the foundation of our economy. So thank you for what you do. And let's get into the agenda. And I'm going to then introduce our panelists and guests here today. So we're going to be covering just kind of what's the very latest. There's always changes and delays with CMMC. So we're going to kind of touch base on that. Talking about getting certified, the process. We're going to talk a little bit about how ProShop is helping. We're going to talk with Nick and Tyler about their journeys on their CMMC compliance roadmap, and then talk a little bit just about marketing it and sort of going forward what you should be doing there. So love to start next by introducing Nick Priest, one of the co-founders of Priest Machining and Assembly. So Nick, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to tell us just a few words about Priest?
No, thanks so much for having me, and I'm really grateful to be here. And I agree that rapid maybe is not the best word.
Totally.
But I get what you mean by it, that it's getting more serious more quickly. But yeah, so Priest Machining and Assembly, we're located here in Boulder, Colorado. A large percentage of our business is aerospace and defense, and so CMMC has been something that we've been getting told about by our customers for probably the last 3 or 4 years, certainly before COVID. And then we really started working on it over this last year, and just kind of chipping away a little bit at a time. And so we're primarily a milling shop, and so we're started in 2018, and that's about all I could say.
Yeah, I got to visit Nick's shop a couple of weeks ago. Beautiful shop. So you and your brother started it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you mostly had watched YouTube videos on machining, and was it the first machine you ever saw in person was when it was being delivered to your shop?
Pretty much, yeah. I was an engineering student and got into YouTube videos, was watching NYC CNC and John Grimsmo, and thought I'd just get a machine just for myself, just to play with, and was going to do engineering, was going to do large, more R&D projects for people, and it spiraled into a machining company. We only do machining at this point. So.
Awesome. I love it. Accidental machine shop owner.
Yeah. Who knows?
Awesome. And could I maybe have you go on mute when you're not talking?
Yeah, I know you can hear them.
You guys are making chips in the background, which is a wonderful thing. And Tyler, I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. So I work for Component Products. We are an aerospace manufacturing company located in Mukilteo. We've been around since 1967. It's actually a third generation family run business. And yeah, we started our CMMC journey back in 2021. And initially we were going for CMMC level 1, but then we decided that it would give us perhaps a strategic advantage to pursue CMMC level 2. So we've been on this journey for a while.
Okay. And thank you for all the help in prepping. I know people will come to understand you definitely know your stuff around this. So I appreciate that. And Kelsey, how about you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Hey, everybody. I'm Kelsey Heikope. I'm the CEO at ProShop, co-founder with Paul. And I haven't been on a CMMC journey since when probably we should have, but I did actually follow it back in late 2017 when we were like, this is coming into effect in January of 2018. Anyway, it was a good wake up moment, I think, for everybody. But I have had a lot of experience in compliance, quality, and implementing true security practices. And so that was something that I felt was important for the industry. And I think that's even maybe a main takeaway for today would be, think about the difference between CMMC compliance and good security practices, and you might find that the delta is not as high as you thought. So good security practices and ransomware is everywhere. There is a lot of people who want your very important manufacturing information, not just to ransom it back to you, but for all kinds of other reasons. So actual security, totally aside from certification, you should invest in that. And this is part of that journey.
Yeah, solid advice always. And myself, I'm Paul. I am the Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder with Kelsey. So he and I met in college and built our machine shop Pro CNC for 17 years and eventually sold it and started ProShop about 6 years ago. So been having a fun time. All right, let's kind of level set here, what we're really talking about here today. There's going to be a lot of acronyms, a lot of things, depending on how far along your knowledge journey. Some of this might be like drinking from a fire hose. For others of you, it's, you could probably run this thing yourself. But and we'll get into the terminology in just a couple more slides, but basically, if you are serving the defense industry as a manufacturer and you are receiving what's called QE or CUI, controlled unclassified information in the form of drawings and models and things that you're going to be manufacturing. Back me up here, guys. They're going to have to get CMMC accreditation. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And surprisingly, we always want to put something after CMMC, even though the last word is certification. So it's one of those. Yep.
And as we were prepping for this, and as you alluded to, Kelsey, this is actually the NIST 800-171, which CMMC is going to be the 2.0 version, is pretty much largely based on, has actually been the letter of the law since January 2018. Can you just elaborate on a little bit about that?
Oh, I mean, it was one of those moments where, it's like clearly there was a need for securing a bunch of important information, especially because our economy is built, from so many building blocks from foundational machine shops that are, small, but incredibly powerful and mighty in the chain, but often many levels down. And so securing information higher in the chain isn't nearly as effective if you can't secure it lower in the chain. So they realized this, and it was part of a long journey to get to here. I think some of the original work was passed in the early 2010s, but this was the clear directive that manufacturers, heads up, you gotta meet this requirement, especially if you're doing DoD work, of course. But that was largely just unpublished. Like, you were lucky if you even knew this even existed, let alone where you really need to be. And I think that the genesis, from my personal opinion, of CMMC was that they said, we got to actually enforce this if people are going to take it seriously. Because after 4 years, in 2021, there was a near zero adoption, like an insignificant amount of adoption on this mandate. And so it was like, okay, let's make it like the other standards, right? Let's make it like an AS requirement, or make it like a ISO requirement, and really have a way to get certified. And there's been some bumps along the way, for those of you who know, in the accreditation and in the Cyber AB. But fundamentally, it's following in the footsteps of many other, I think, very successful and probably very impactful for the actual reasons that they should be in place. And this is what I wanted to say again, which is doing these controls, once you read them and you understand what they are, they're all good security practices. A few of them are a little more onerous than you want. You're like, really? I got to aggregate my logs for, analysis? It's like, but most of them are like, just do that thing. It's great. You can lift your SPRS score just by realizing you want to be safe. So that's a little bit of the history, and also a plug for do a bunch of this, even if you're not headed for CMMC.
Yeah. And Tyler or Nick, Tyler, you were mentioning about the DFARS and having this starting to show up on some of your contracts and your customers. Can you just share a little bit about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I know that our customers have been asking for a while now for us to prepare for CMMC. It's kind of been, a little bit of a buzzword. It still seems like there's some confusion when it comes to how this is going to impact procurement practices. It seems like the tendency right now is that tier ones and government buyers are going to overprescribe this rule. A case in point, our company got a pretty simple part just the other day. We were reading the contract. They put DFAR 7012 on there. So it's it's coming. It's going to be pretty far-reaching, I think. And from what I've heard from major primes and tier ones, they're starting to cut off suppliers that aren't NIST 800-171 compliant.
Mm-hmm. I have heard that from a few clients of ours. So yeah, and didn't you say that was like for some kind of washer, something super simple?
Yeah,
not
it was
really
it was a spacer.
A spacer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, good case in point about maybe overprescribing or just really being the letter of the law. Because if it goes into a defense, vehicle or some, it's part of the, it's going to be controlled. So, all right. And for anyone that's been following this for the last many years, there's been lots of delays, lots of changes, revisions from 1.0 to 2.0. So I would love to let one of the three of you kind of take this one because you're a little bit more in the loop than I am. But there's been a proposed rule that's due any day now. Is that right?
Yep.
Yep. The rules, which is like a defined term in this case, are coming out, hopefully. I mean, there's a whole bunch of compliance nerds who are all like sitting, waiting for this to be published. But the rules are imminent. There's a lot of folks who are joking it's a Christmas present. I don't think for most of us that this is the Christmas present we're hoping for, but certainly in the compliance space, it's pretty important. And then of course, just moving a little further along, there has already been a lot of motion into a third revision of the 800-171 standard. And, I'm not an expert in the delta between those two, but my understanding from some of the folks I talked to is that it's enough of a change that this is not like, oh yeah, we put a few T's, dotted a few I's, crossed a few T's, and we should be good. There's material changes, and like most compliance for any type of certification, this will be an ongoing thing. But hopefully it's like the other ones, which is they're actually doing the hard work of figuring out how to make it both easier and safer at the same time. That's our wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm. And Tyler, you were, when we were prepping for this, you mentioned that this is a proposed rule change for CMMC. Can you define kind of what that means What does proposed mean?
Yeah, proposed means it's not going to be effective. Like it won't go into contracts until after a certain time period has transpired. So it's going to be a year after the rule is published is probably when it will become effective. If it was an interim rule, then it would be eligible to be included in contracts. But from what I've heard, people think that it's too big of a rule for it to be interim. Like they're going to need to solicit feedback from the DIB and maybe make some changes if they can. But I've also heard that changes at this stage of the game are pretty rare. So it's coming. It's as soon as it's published, you know, that timeline where companies can get prepared is just getting shorter.
So if the proposed rule is truly coming out any day, does that mean you think it'll be in effect, sort of letter of the law, about a year from now, next, December of 2024?
That's what I've heard. That's what people seem to think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, just to make sure everyone's clear about this, so CMMC is not the same as NIST 800-171, but at this point, the version 2.0 is almost verbatim, pointing to the 800-171. So that Rev 3 of the NIST standard will directly affect the requirements of CMMC. Did I get that right, guys?
I think everybody thinks
yes.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Very good. And the key takeaway, just because it's been delayed, yes, that's true, but this is coming. Don't bet on it going away. I definitely have heard people say, it's never going to happen. And I think they may be sorely disappointed when it actually is in place and they will no longer be able to bid on or do the jobs and contracts they have done in the past.
And one more little pitch for do the stuff is improving your security posture, because that's always good. Like if you're not starting anywhere else, start with the stuff that makes you more secure and less susceptible to intrusion and data loss.
Advice. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was gonna say, I feel like that was me a little bit, kind of like it's never going to happen, because I feel like we've been doing this and hearing about it for so many years, and I didn't start taking it super seriously until, as part of the onboarding process, we're starting to get entire interviews on this subject and being really questioned about it. And so that was probably about a year ago now, and that's when we kind of were like, okay, it's actually happening. But prior to that, I was on that boat of, we'll see, So
yeah. Well, it's not surprising that people have had that position, because there's been so many delays and so many changes that
it's just been talked about for so long, and we were told by one of our customers the first time we heard about it, they were like, you need to be ready for this probably within a year. And that was like 2018, and we haven't heard about it from that customer since. So, and it's really easy to let it slip.
Sure.
And until you start getting asked about it, which is what happened to us.
And the exponential rise in cybersecurity crime over the last 5 years, if you just look at that on a graph, it's not even remotely close to linear. It's so parabolic, and that's why this is getting so much attention, in my opinion, is that this stuff is getting lost. Information is getting lost at just a prodigious rate, and that's got to get tightened up.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to launch a poll. We're going to just a one question poll. We'll do another one at the end as well. We're just asking about CUI. So please go ahead and answer that while we talk about some of these terms. And this is obviously a considerably smaller list. We've already, mentioned a few others, including the term DIB, which is Defense Industrial Base. But just maybe when you guys want to sort of go through this a little bit, just briefly talk about these terms. You want to take that, Kelsey or Tyler?
Yeah, I'm happy to have you do it, Tyler, if you want, but also, yeah.
Sure. I'll take a couple of them. I'll let you handle FedRAMP, because I know you guys have some familiarity with that. So CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. That's what we're talking about today. That is going to be the assessment framework that is going to allow companies to get certified that they're meeting the controls of NIST 800-171. C3PAO always makes me think of C3PO.
Of course, everybody.
Right. But that stands for CMMC Third Party Assessment Organization. These are organizations that are they're going to be the organizations auditing you. And they're the ones that get accredited. We're the ones that get certified. The other one, and then I'll let Kelsey take the rest, is MSP, Managed Services Provider. That one's kind of near and dear, I guess, to my heart, because we're a small company, as I'm sure lots of other manufacturers are, and we don't have in-house IT expertise. So it's a very important piece of the puzzle, is making sure that you find an adequate service provider.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelsey, you want to take the rest quickly?
Yeah, for sure. Just real quick, organization seeking certification, that's just all of us as machine shops, like, hey, we got to get certified. And assets are something that are pretty easy to talk about because they're kind of everything that would have value to your organization is some level of asset. But in terms of cybersecurity, we're really talking about assets that have this interaction with your key information, with your information that should be controlled. Now, in most cases, there's tons of information you should keep secure, but in terms of certification, they care about ones that are identified and classified as controlled, right? Controlled. And then FedRAMP, real quick, that is actually a sort of outsized standard, and what I mean by that is that it's significantly more onerous than a CMMC requirement, and it usually covers an entire organizational stream. It's actually specifically for products, and you can check it out, FedRAMP, and they have a whole marketplace of all the products that have achieved an ATO. But the reason this is particularly important is because of that DFARS clause we talked about before, and they have specific language in there about FedRAMP moderate compliance, and equivalence is actually the word they chose to use there, which has everybody talking about it, but that's important.
Thank you, guys. All right, let's talk about assuming that a shop understands that, yep, they have confirmed they are getting CUI, they are serving the defense base. What do they need to do to even understand and start their journey if they haven't already? So I think, as you alluded to, Tyler, finding a subject matter expert to help you, is that so? MSPs can be that. Are there other types of organizations out there that could also be an expert to help?
Yeah, so our journey actually started off with consultants. And so, a consultant could be a subject matter expert. I don't have a lot of familiarity with this, but I do think that some people provide like cybersecurity as like a service. I don't know exactly what all that entails. I don't think it means that they're necessarily managing your IT, but maybe helping you with your compliance programs. And then, an MSP, though, can sort of function as a virtual CISO, which is what our MSP does. And CISO stands for Chief Information Security Officer. That's the person that's essentially responsible for executing on vision and strategy for your cybersecurity processes and maturity.
Awesome. Okay. And Nick, I know you've been looking at your CUI and your categorization of assets. Do you want to share a little bit about number 3 with us?
Oh, sure. I can try my best here. The machines are possibly about to just all kick on at the same time.
It's all good, man.
But our journey is a little different than going with a service provider. We have somebody in house who's been we've been tackling this kind of slowly, and so the first thing we did was like it says, just literally mapping the flow of CUI as we're receiving it and as it's going out to the production floor, and then what's happening to it after that. In terms of categorizing our assets, I don't know that I would be the person within our organization to directly comment much more than that on it. We have like I said, a person here who's been helping us in-house, and so I might not be the best to answer that particular question.
You want to take that one, Kels?
Sure, I'll just jump in a bit on assets. I think generally speaking, there's two sort of main types of assets that they're concerned with. There's hardware assets. These are all the terminals, all the routers, all the workstations, all the stuff that deals with CUI in some way. And then there's of course software, which is also very much an asset, something you should have good tabs on and protect, but it's a little less tangible. You can't hook up to it usually. Sometimes it's on a particular workstation, but in general, those software assets also do a lot of the processing of that information, right? They're the ones that are actually displaying it on your terminals. They're the ones that are, giving you a interface for your 3D solid model of whatever flavor you have. And so those software assets are ones that need to be controlled, because quite often they're the gateway into actually getting or seeing or using that information. So those are software assets.
All right. And then the last two, implementing the controls, that's going to be the 110 controls of the NIST 800-171 standard. And then once, I guess, you feel like you can say yes to most of those, you prepare for an assessment with a C3 PAO. Is that kind of
that's certified third-party, auditor. That's where some of the delay has been. Just to frame that a little bit, as late as middle of this year, there were precious few of those. So I think the government estimates there's about 300,000 companies in the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base. And if you've got 20 auditors, that's going to take a long time. So they've been trying to mint more of those certified assessors, and they're doing a good job. It's rolling forward. But I think that's where a significant amount of the delay has been. And that's going to be exponential, right? Not only are going to burn through some of those companies already and get onto new companies, but also they're making many, many more of those assessors. So,
right. And we thought we'd just share this very briefly for folks that are actually making product, machining parts, fabricating things, delivering those, but not at the prime level. You guys are all in sort of the level 2 category. Level 1, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, Tyler. You thought you originally go for level 1, but then you decided level 2. Wouldn't the fact that you're getting CUI mandate you have to be level 2? And level 1 would be like someone that's maybe, an accounting firm or a janitor firm that serves a defense facility or something like that.
Yeah, certainly if what you have in your possession is considered CUI, then yes, you already need to be, you'll need to be CMMC level 2. For us, a lot of the stuff that we make is used in commercial applications, commercial aerospace. It does sometimes also get installed in, military applications as well. And so there was some, internal discussion over like, well, they're talking about cybersecurity. Does it really matter for the products that we're making? Because we don't, that's not always considered CUI.
Right.
And so there was a little bit of a discussion there, but then we just kind of decided like, hey, you know what? We feel like this is actually an opportunity for our company. It could open the doors to get more work. So that was kind of our reasoning for going CMMC level 2. And, as I mentioned earlier, we did get an order for, some of those parts that we sell for commercial applications, and the DFAR 7012 was on there. Whether it should be on there, I don't know. And I don't know if like the buyer knows that too, or if they can make that decision. But if we're already there, then
sure,
we're already meeting the requirements.
And I will mention talking to a very large machine shop in the last few weeks, more than $100 million company. And so they are in direct talks with companies like Boeing and Airbus and Bombardier. And it's their assessment that those companies are, even though they're not in the defense space for those commercial programs, very much moving as well into this cybersecurity realm. So it may, even though it may not be government mandated, it's very possible that the commercial aerospace industry will start adopting these because they also don't want their data to be breached and hacked. So
it's a really good point, Paul. I actually know of one client who got a flow down requirement from their non-government contract, but it stated that they needed to be 800-171 compliant, right? And they were like, we could try and assess you individually on your security posture, but that doesn't make sense to us. NIST did all the work.
Right.
Why don't we go ahead and just tell you have to be 800-171?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So Tyler, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's a really important strategic decision that shops should be thinking about.
Yeah, and just Paul on that FCI, just to be clear, that's federal contract information. So that's that level 1 sort of area, FCI, and everything under the sun is under there. Like apparently, they include death certificates as FCI. It's federal information, so that theoretically is controlled by level 1. So depending on what you get, you might.
Yeah. So here's a bunch of other things you might want to be thinking about or considering. And I know, Tyler, that you had mentioned you chose some company that you thought was going to be a great fit. It turns out they weren't quite up to this level you needed. So you went with a different firm. Can you just share a little bit about what people might be wanting to be looking at or cautious of with an MSP?
Yeah. So the MSP that we had before we realized that we were going to have to switch, they kind of more were just the general MSP that serviced, customers, I guess, in any industry. And it was pretty apparent that like they were not going to be ready for CMMC because they were kind of treating it like other, cybersecurity regulations out there that don't have any teeth to it. Like, CMMC has teeth to it because you're going to get certified. And then, so we started looking around. We found a company. We actually found a couple companies, and we went with one option. I won't say their name, but they were cheaper than the other alternative. The other alternative was very costly. And it seemed good. It seemed okay, but there were a bunch of red flags that I didn't see. Because it was like my first rodeo, I guess. But, they were just, it became clear that they weren't going to be a partner in this process. They were really designed for scale. And if, I'm not saying that there aren't, companies out there that can maybe make this work at scale, but I think with something like CMMC and the need to closely collaborate with, a subject matter expert or your IT department, like is not something that can just be done for you completely. Like you have to be a part of the process. So if you're looking for an MSP, my recommendation would be make sure they're not oversimplifying compliance. Make sure that they are engaged within the broader CMMC community, and they're not just, over-promising what they can't deliver.
Sure.
Make sure that there's evidence, that they are continuously investing in meeting these requirements, much like, ProShop developing features to support compliance. There should be proof that they're doing the right things. Another is, if they're withholding evidence that you need to do your due diligence process, I'd say that's a red flag. Make sure they're not outsourcing anything either. Those would be my recommendations.
Solid. Thank you very much for that. Nick, anything on this list you particularly want to double click on? You're muted still. There you go.
Okay, it has like a little bit of delay there. I really liked everything Tyler just said. Our plan's a little different. We have a part-time staff who's kind of acting as our chief information officer and tackling a lot of this on our behalf at our facility. And so our plan is to then get in contact with somebody like an MSP before we actually go to get certified. We're trying to take on as much as we can internally. Because like Kelsey said, a lot of it's just like good security practices, and a lot of it is achievable. If you look at it, just the list it's 110 items, right? And so it's really overwhelming, but it certainly is possible to kind of approach it slowly and methodically and actually take care of some of these things. But for us, that's how we're tackling it. And we found that, there's a lot of companies out there that are doing a lot to help you check some of those boxes, like ProShop. There's a couple others that I could add, but like ProShop, for example, just doing a couple of these things the way we're supposed to helps us check some of these boxes. And so we're been kind of taking that approach of start small and obtainable. And like it says here, responsibility matrix. If you haven't seen that from some of these people, that's a literal list of things that we're tackling for you, that if you can add into your security plan, you should be compliant if you're doing it the way you should. Like an example would be working directly out of the K drive. We don't, that's like one possible example. Yeah, so I'm starting to feel like I'm rambling a little bit.
No, I appreciate that. Those are good points.
And I was going to say that shared responsibility matrix, and the ways in which other platforms, not just someone who's consulting with you for cybersecurity, because often they don't have influence directly on the tools you're using. You're using all kinds of different hardware and software elements, and so getting that shared responsibility matrix from your vendors where they can help you. This is software vendors, this is hardware vendors. There's sometimes really simple stuff like certain types of hardware is just not compliant, so don't buy that stuff. Know up front, right, that's the case. So anyway, I would say for sure on that. And then I would just want to double click, Paul, on that build mature security / business processes. I know I'm kind of harping on this, but there's tons of good, simple stuff you can do as business processes that increase your security posture dramatically and tick some boxes on the CMMC controls, right? To your point, Nick.
Awesome. Well, we are getting way behind schedule. We're going to have to pick up the pace a little bit here. So let's just very quickly. So SPRS or SPRS score. This is basically how you're doing on those 110 controls. I know, Tyler, you're all over this. You want to just share a little bit about what this means for people?
Yeah, if you do have DFAR 7012 on your contracts, then you will have to have your SPRS score submitted. SPRS, I forget what it actually stands for, but I know it's a system within PIEE, and I'd also forget what that stands for. But you'll have to have that score submitted in order to be compliant. And if you're doing any work direct with like the government, like on like sam.gov, in order to obtain technical information that's classified as CUI, you will need that score submitted.
Awesome. And I just shared a couple of links, so grab those links in the chat. And SPRS, I believe, is the Supplier Performance Risk System, but I also have no idea what PIE means. But anyway, good stuff there. Let's move along. So identifying CUI and scope and boundaries, that's a really big part of this. Kelsey, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just talk real briefly about this, even though I'm not going to spend too much time on it, even though it is probably one of the single biggest things you can do to minimize the burden. If you decide that you're going to, appropriately scope, and what I mean by that is, define where the CUI is going to come in, flow through your company, and then reside in terms of long-term storage and, later use, that will really determine those assets we were talking about. So, whether certain terminals, certain routers, certain software platforms are actually interacting, right? Are processing, transmitting, or storing, as they list right there. And so setting up those flows. And one of the things that I think is super important about it is identification. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you need to be able to have a system that immediately identifies and then tags CUI so that you can treat it properly. It's nearly impossible to expect your entire company to treat it properly if you haven't identified it as that kind of information. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that flow and being able to scope correctly will help you on your assessment dramatically.
Okay, great. Should we touch just on the three main basic dimensions: storing, transmitting, and processing? Tyler?
Yeah, I know we've talked about it real briefly, but storing's pretty basic, which is like wherever it's actually sitting, in some kind of state, like a hard drive or a backup drive or a cloud storage provider. because clouds
or a
are actually
or a filing cabinet even.
Yeah, just on the printer, just sitting there, at the machine on paper. Absolutely, all those things, right? If you sent it as part of a package to your plating supplier, because you need to tell them where to rack the part appropriately, but you're sending them the drawing of the part. That's CUI. You're transmitting it to them, maybe in the box or maybe in your email or wherever it is. So yeah, for sure, those three things.
Okay. And once you define those boundaries, I guess part of making sure you're compliant is that you're not letting that CUI leak past the boundaries that you've set for your own company. And every company will have slightly different boundaries based on their network and their people and how they're choosing to meet the compliance requirements. Is that a fair way to say it?
I think that's a good a good way to describe it. And I think that an example of this is you may have certain aspects of your even local company infrastructure that don't have any way to access this kind of information. The simplest example is your guest Wi-Fi. Like everybody should have a guest Wi-Fi. Don't have just one Wi-Fi for everybody who shows up. And that way, anyone who's on the guest Wi-Fi is what they call logically separated, right, from that. So you can't, there is no path from your guest Wi-Fi into your CUI data. So yeah, absolutely creating those boundaries and knowing physically and digitally where they are. Usually it's the front door is the physical part, right? Like that's pretty common. So
yeah.
And there's still lots to work out there. Like, what if you send stuff UPS? Like, you're sending CUI with UPS. How's that going to work? There's a lot of question marks still.
Just a random note. Well, yeah, I was going to say, I really like the guest network example because that's one of the ones that it didn't occur to us until we started working on this, that it's wise to maybe have a separate router outside of the firewall for your guest network. And so that's why I really like your point that some of this is just good practice that you should probably do regardless.
Thanks.
Fantastic. All right. I know we could go on that topic for a long time. I was going to switch directions here and just talk a little bit about how we are trying to help our clients meet this. And we'll start by saying that ProShop is just one puzzle piece in a much bigger effort. We're not claiming to do it all. We're not claiming to be some kind of miracle cure, but we are definitely working very hard to make this less costly, less onerous, and a little bit simpler for our customers. So I'll share a few screenshots here, but we're basically talking about some basic just security settings that we've built into ProShop. We'll talk for a minute about ProShop Safe, which stands for Secure Access File Ecosystem. That was Kelsey's brilliant naming. I was leaning more to Vault, but Safe is definitely the best name. And then we for sure are going to be getting on the path for FedRAMP moderate equivalence or certification, I guess it will be. And we for sure share our shared responsibility matrix with clients that shows, what they are responsible for, what ProShop can cover, and what AWS in the GovCloud, says that they got covered. So you don't need to, and we don't need to worry about those things. So let's jump first into security settings. So if there are any ProShop customers on this webinar, and I can't see the list, but make sure you go into your security settings and turn some of these things on. And there are basic things like, what we call our password validation rules, and we have programmed in specific, CMMC compliant password rules, as opposed to, having a three character password that is super easy to hack. Things like, disabling inactive sessions, or how often you need to reset your password, or things of that nature. So if your software doesn't have these kind of settings, you definitely should be asking them about that. Anything on this, Kelsey, you want to mention?
No, that's great, Paul.
Okay.
There's lots more, but
we're also right natively inside of ProShop managing one-time password devices. So we use YubiKeys, which are I think kind of the gold standard for FIPS compliant, which is another acronym, second factor authentications. So we can cover that requirement, which I believe is one of the specific NIST requirements?
Got to have two-factor.
Yep.
And
Okay.
For sure, just on those hard keys. Yeah, thanks, Nick. He's holding it up. That's perfect. These keys are a very inexpensive and very secure way to manage this. And I think there's a lot of broad acceptance that these kinds of OTP devices are affordable and extremely robust ways to do two-factor authentication.
And people have asked us about apps, that can be used for a second factor. We're still trying to understand that, because I think a lot of shops are, and I know, Nick, you guys are going to no cell phones on the shop floor. So you couldn't really use an app as your second factor.
Yeah, and the reason they're doing that is, I don't know about you, Nick, but a lot of people are doing that is because they don't want to manage, 20 people's cell phones.
So I had actually asked that question before we switched to YubiKeys, and it was because I am just so comfortable with the authenticator apps. Like, I have so many things set up on it, so I thought, like, is that an option? And I was trying to set it up kind of hastily, and so I had Authenticator readily available to try out, and so that's why I was asking. But I found YubiKey just to be so easy to set up on ProShop that it was. I didn't. If I had known it was as easy as it was, I probably wouldn't have waited so long, because they are just like $30 a pop. You just buy a bag of them.
Nice.
So this is some information that is relatively new to ProShop. We're calling it, this is ProShop Safe. And we have a couple of screenshots where these new attributes are in the user module. So individual employees can be added to what we call a file access security group, and then also authorized for certain classification markings. And in the lower right here, we're seeing an example of when you're attaching a file into ProShop, it allows you to classify those files, tag them, with CUI, with FCI, or whatever these, ITAR, whatever it might be. And clients will have full control over that list. They could use it for HIPAA if they're in the medical device industry. But we believe that's an important part of the marking requirement, and then limiting access to who can see what. And then on this next screen, just an example of the configuration behind ProShop Safe, where you can completely lock down the file storage that backs up the ProShop application, where you would be storing things like models and drawings and other types of things that would be CUI, and being able to very precisely limit who can access and do what to what folders and files. Do you want to add anything to that, Kelsey? I know you've been deep into this.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I certainly think is valuable about information aggregation, which is like, if you're looking for information about a part number, it's tough if you got to go look in 5 different places for the information to understand what's up with that part number. So the idea of like siloing CUI in one spot, but all the non-CUI information in some other area that you would then have to reference maybe 2 or 3 different places, that gets kind of tough from just a transactional daily work basis. So if instead you can employ a technique like this, where you're classifying that information as CUI and therefore protecting it right in the same directory, right in the context, so that folks who are allowed to see it can see it, and folks who are not, but also it's readily available to the right people at the right time. That seems like the good combination in this case. And that's really what we tried to go for here with ProShop Safe and those classifications.
Awesome. And I do want to point out, and I'm still learning and exploring this whole notion, but we've definitely had clients that have shared that they have eliminated their local servers. They even are eliminating their domains and work groups. They just have basically a collection of computers, ProShop terminals in their shop that are directly connected to the GovCloud, through ProShop Safe and their second factor authentication. And they're really trying to go for like pretty much a zero digital CUI on-premise model, where they're just, it could be that their entire local company's network is not within the CUI boundary. I'm not saying that's possible. I'm just saying that's what I've heard some are trying to achieve, and it's possible that is. Maybe.
From a storage perspective, that is absolutely something I think that could happen. From a processing perspective, every terminal's got to process it. So,
of course,
the terminal is in scope, for sure.
Yeah, great distinction. And then last couple more here. This is the very latest hot sort of beta. This is actually a beta test screenshot that I was given permission to share. This is where you can even take anything in your ProShop cloud storage drive and very quickly add or remove or replace classification markings across, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of files all at once. So it'll be a key part of that classification system. So looking forward to having clients get to play with this. And then this, Kelsey, I'd love to have you just share very briefly on this one.
I'll just spend a couple minutes on this. This is specifically targeted at companies that don't have a big budget to work through the entire process of CMMC and the whole plan, and then executing on all of their POAM, and then keeping up to date with all of the things that they've made. So you make a list of assets and you're like, oh good, I got an asset list. And the question is that always being updated exactly as it should be? And typically when it's a spreadsheet, you may not be keeping that as current as you wish you were. So this slide really just shows some of the ways that specific modules within ProShop are being leveraged by some clients to not only manage their compliance journey, but then also remain compliant and continue to update their processes and use a lot of the ProShop ecosystem to do that fairly effectively. So I won't spend a lot of time on it, but being able to do things like the documents module for a system security plan, or the equipment module to keep track of those assets. Those kinds of things are all ways which you could leverage ProShop, and that you'll see a lot of that specificity in a shared responsibility matrix. We'll outline specifically how each module can support each control.
And this just harkens back to the really solid advice that that security practices are really just good, mature business practices. And these modules that are in orange here, these are modules that have been in ProShop for more than a decade, and they were built for our QMS compliance, but they happen to be just really solid to apply for these security focused business processes. So we were as we were mapping this out, we were pleased to realize that there's a lot of it that can be managed right in here without needing a ton of spreadsheets or other software. And for clients that want to use that, it's there for them to scaffold that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kels, we have a few clients sort of beta testing what we call our sort of security flying start package, if you will. We need a better term for it, but where we're helping them implement their CMMC journey using all these modules.
That's correct. Yep. We have, several hundred documents and templates and queries and systems that are built right in to ProShop using these modules, that we have some clients beta testing that right now.
Okay, awesome. And as we were preparing for this and going through that responsibility matrix, we identified that of the 110 controls of the NIST standard, ProShop has built features and has functionality that directly manage or partially manage 55, which magically is exactly half of 110 controls. So we're feeling pretty strong that we are hopefully making an impact in our clients to make it less cumbersome, less expensive. And it is going to be manageable for them to do that without just a crazy budget.
Hopefully you don't need to spend that $150,000
a lot of
on that journey.
People are saying it will take
way less.
Selecting a C3PAO, besides having a friendly robot at your side, maybe Tyler, do you want to share a little bit about what you might recommend for this?
This is actually not something I've really looked into yet.
Okay.
So I can hand it off to Kelsey, but I would say getting your, if you're just starting out on your journey, finding your subject matter expert who's going to help you is going to be a very important first step. And then I would say the C3PAO could be the focus after that.
Yeah, this would be once you feel like you have all your SPURS score is 110 or whatever the total, you feel like you're actually ready to go get audited. Mm-hmm. Is this about the right time, Kelsey? Maybe you would think you'd choose one?
I mean, I think that because it's actually, sort of conflict of interest for the very people who helped you get there to also be a third party that's kind of the definition of third party. They weren't involved in your whole journey. That this is later in the game. That being said, I know they're in extremely high demand right now. So you may, if you're looking to expedite your timeline a little bit, try and get on someone's calendar in advance of when you're actually ready. Because if you wait till you're all done and dusted, you could be a long wait for that. Now, I think if you're all done and good anyway, and it isn't yet on your requirements list to have the actual assessment, you may be in perfectly good shape to look for that C3PAO after the fact. And since they're in high demand right now, it'll become easier and easier, I think, to find these folks. There is a marketplace of Cyber AB accredited third party, certified third party auditors, or assessors, I should say. If you go on the cyberab.org site, they have a marketplace there of all folks who have passed that bar, because those are the people who are graduating these auditors.
Great advice. Probably good thing to think about, just being, we mentioned earlier, I know when CMMC really got traction, companies were coming out of the woodwork saying that they could help and they can help get you compliant in, weeks or months. And just, you got to be really careful about people that are preying on companies that aren't really sure exactly what it's going to take. So just be really cautious out there.
Yeah. Can I just say, Paul, on that one, if you think of it conceptually more like some of the other requirements, like becoming ISO certified or becoming AS certified, and realize that you actually have a lot of the control in the situation. You're building the processes. You are driving the behaviors in your organization. This isn't a nebulous tech thing. There are actually very few controls that are kind of this like weird tech magic. Most of the controls are all things that are very much your business and how you plan to do it. And I think if you come at it from that perspective, you'll have a lot more, not only confidence, but success in finding the right fit for your organization to help you and to get audited. You are very much in control.
Yeah. Awesome. And I noticed in the chat, Scott and Tim are chatting about VLANs. I presume that's a virtual LAN. So, and Tim, thanks for mentioning ProShop on premise. We haven't mentioned that. We certainly do have a handful of clients that do ProShop completely on premise, even behind full air gap, where their network is not connected to the outside world at all. So that is something we can support as well. So, so marketing, I think Tyler, you sort of set the right tone earlier. This can be very much a strategic move that companies can make to be on the, maybe not on the leading edge if they're not started yet, but be really proactive to get this. It will be something I think even companies outside of the defense space will appreciate about a vendor, feel confident that their data will stay safe there. Couple of other points. Don't say you're certified if you're not. You really got to use the right terminology, talking about your SPURS score and just how many of the controls you meet. And as we were prepping for these, you guys were debating whether you do or do not publicly share your SPURS score. You want to just touch on that real briefly?
I don't know about publicly, but we've been asked for it by 2 customers now, asked for it. And I guess if I could answer that quick question about how often you should be doing it, what we were trying to do is do it like as often as your POAM. So like as you're making updates to your score, they should be reflected in SPURS. And I think that's really good because it shows your progress in SPURS. You don't just have one number of a score. You have your record going from 5 to 10 to wherever you end up. Yeah. And so I think it's wise to be doing it as often as you're making changes. And then I don't know about sharing it publicly, but we've certainly shared it with customers as part of
I think customers is wise.
Yeah. So, especially if they're asking.
Yeah.
So Kelsey's been a champ at answering chat question or Q&A questions via text this whole time. So I think, Tyler, you just covered Adam Zimmer's question about changing SPURS scores. And we are running a little long, but I wanted to just say thank you so much to everyone, to Nick and Tyler and Kelsey for all your expertise today, Nate and Modern Machine Shop for hosting us. hopefully people got something valuable from this that helped them in their decisions and their journeys going forward.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Tyler. Thanks, Kelsey. And thank you to everyone for listening in. And thanks to ProShop for making this webinar possible. And just a disclaimer, you all should receive an email with a link to the recording to this within the next few hours. So thank you, everyone. I think that's a good spot to end it. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all,
Awesome.
and happy holidays.
Thanks, Nick.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.